In this video, I'm going to be ranking every boss in mini-boss in a tier list. I usually haven't put the mini-bosses on my list, so I thought I'd make a tier list where I have all of the mini-bosses, like the Fjordur mini-bosses, the Genesis Part 2 ones, and the Dodorex and Wyvern, with all of those in this video. The first boss on the list is the Dragon, which I'm going to put at the A tier. I definitely do like this boss quite a bit. It is pretty challenging, and I believe that makes it a lot more intense when you go into it, which I definitely like that part of this fight, as well as it's just a giant dragon, which is really awesome, and the arena is really sick as well, being like a giant volcanic arena. This one's definitely a fun one to fight, in my opinion. Also, I don't really think any of the bosses on this list are bad, so if I do rank one low, I don't think it's like terrible or anything, but just how the list goes. Next boss on the list is Bela. This is a mini boss in Fjordur, and I'm going to put it in the C tier. I think this one's pretty decent all around. It's basically like a giant bee. It's just a reskin bee, but it does actually have some pretty unique qualities to it. So I do think that one's pretty cool, and I do like the Fjordur mini bosses. I just gonna put this one in C tier. It's not my favorite of them, but I do think it's pretty interesting, especially with the giant swarms of bees coming after you. It's a pretty fun one to fight, but it is not the most challenging boss. Next on the list is Modair, the first and only underwater boss, and I'll put this one at B tier. I definitely do like it a lot, but I don't think it's worthy of the A tier. I just don't find it as enjoyable to fight as some of the A tier bosses, even though I do think the idea of a water boss is pretty cool, and I do enjoy that part of it quite a bit. And you basically have to like kill the eel minions before you can damage it, which I think is better than just having to send your entire army in. Definitely adds more like stuff you have to do in the boss rather than just sending your army in. You actually have to take out the eels first, so I think it's pretty cool. Next is the Manticore, which I'm going to put at C tier. Kind of sucks as this is the final boss for Scorched Earth, even though it's technically one of the Guardians, like the Dragon and Broodmother and stuff. Even though it is like the final boss, I wish Scorched Earth had a better final boss, or at least one that wasn't the Guardian. Had more bosses on Scorched Earth either way. This one's the Manticore, and it's pretty easy, which of course we're not just going off difficulty in this tier list, but that does make it a lot less intense going into the fight, because you pretty much know you're going to win every time, and it's not really the most like crazy boss fight, so I'm just going to keep it at C. After that, I have the Broodmother, which I'm actually going to put in the A tier. Some people could consider this one pretty high, but I actually do quite enjoy this boss fight. The giant spider, it's not insanely challenging, but it's not super easy either. It's kind of like in the mid tier of difficulty, but I still think it's fun to go in to this boss fight because it basically spawns in a bunch of spiders, and it's the giant Broodmother after all. I think it's a pretty cool, and it's one of the classic bosses, and I definitely still enjoy this one, so it's going to be in the A tier. Next is the Forest Titan, which I'm going to put at the B tier. All of the Titans are pretty solid bosses, or at least the mini bosses that I'm talking about, and I think this one's a pretty fun one as well. This one is the giant Forest Titan. It's got some pretty crazy abilities, like being able to just like take you straight off of your mount, which is pretty interesting, as well as like making a forest around the area. It's absolutely massive, but they're not the hardest ones. You can bring armies of pretty much whatever you want, which does make it quite fun, but also makes it quite easy as well. But I do like the Forest Titan overall. I think it's pretty cool, so it's going to be in the B tier. Next is the Ice Worm on Ragnarok. This one's in a cave, and it's going to be in the B tier. I think this is really cool, and I wish Ark did this more, having bosses in these caves, because after Ragnarok, they didn't really do it, and then they kind of did it on Fjordur, but it's not the exact same thing. The Ice Worm, anyway, it's basically like an Alpha Death Worm, but you basically go down there on foot, so you can't bring any dinos, and you have to use weapons and stuff, and you're like on this ledge where you have to like fall down there, and then you like shoot it with your weapons and try to kill it as fast as you can before it kills you. I think it's a really fun concept, and I'm going to put it at the B tier. Can't put it any higher because it's not one of the main bosses, it's more of just a mini boss, so I'm going to keep it there. After that, we have the Overseer, which is easily going to be S tier, one of my favorite boss fights in the game. There's just so much build up to it after you have to defeat all the other bosses to get to it. Then you have to go through the tech cave. It kind of like builds up the intensity as you're getting ready for this boss fight. And then once you finally make it to the tech cave in here, it's an awesome fight. You got the best soundtrack for a boss, in my opinion, in the entire game. The soundtrack makes it so good, as well as the areas around where you can just like see all the arcs and stuff. The arena is awesome, as well as this fight is absolutely spectacular. You got basically it transforms into all the other three bosses as well as you fight it, and then it can like stun you off. This one is really fun. Next, we have the Mech Knight Rider thing. I'm actually going to put this one in an F tier. Like I said, I don't think these are bad, but this is definitely the worst of all the Ark bosses, in my personal opinion. First of all, I don't really like the life support mission that it's in. It's just like doing color combos, which for a survival game I think is really weird. And then once you get here, you basically do more color combos, and then once you finally start fighting the boss, it's extremely fast, and you can't bring any dinos, which normally I think would make a boss fight cool, but this one it's so fast that it just stands above you the whole time, so you end up looking at it, and it just spams pteranodons at you, so you're just your screen is just covered with bullets and pteranodons and this thing hovering above you, and there's not really much of a fight, really. You're just like sitting there spamming, hoping you could kill it fast. I don't think it's much of an interesting fight, in my opinion. It's definitely the least out of all the arc bosses. After that, I have the Macro Summoner, which I'm actually going to put in the D tier. I think it's better than the other one. And I actually like the concept of it. A giant summoner attacking you seems like a pretty cool boss, but this one basically you have to go running around hitting pressure plates to basically unlock it, which I do like having different things you have to do to unlock, like being able to kill it other than just being able to damage it directly. But going and standing on pressure plates I don't think is the right option here, because just going, the gameplay is basically for this boss fight is run around and go stand on pressure plates, and then if you stand on the wrong one you get electrocuted. And I want to actually be fighting the boss and not just running around like standing on pressure plates the whole time, which is pretty much what this boss fight is. But I do like the boss itself, and it's kind of fun, so I'll just keep it in D tier for now. Next is the Ice Titan, which I'm going to put at B tier. Probably my favorite of the Titans. I don't think the Titans are worthy of being in the A tier though, even though they are really close. It is kind of just hard to put them because there's a lot of really good bosses in the game, and I think these ones are just not close enough to be in the A tier. They are really fun to fight though, especially the Ice Titan, which I'm talking about now. It's got like ice breath and stuff, can jump around, which definitely makes for an interesting fight, and a lot of stuff you have to take into account for is it just being able to jump around and do huge amounts of damage with all its ice breath and stuff. Next boss is the Megapithecus, which is going to be in C tier, probably the least of the island bosses. It is really easy, and it kind of just makes it to where you don't really like fear much going into this boss fight. You just go in and you know you're going to win, which with a boss fight like that makes it a lot less intense. As well as it's just one of the guardians, so it's not insanely special, so I'm just going to keep it at C. And next is Fenrir Sulfur, with the Fjordur boss. Basically you have to defeat all 6 other bosses on the map in order to get to this one, so a lot of build up, and it's actually pretty difficult. With that ability, I believe it can like insta-kill you off your mount, which is pretty dangerous, even though I think that's a bit too much, being able to insta-kill you, but there's a lot you have to account for this boss. And you also have the Fenrirs attacking you, which I think is really fun as well. It's not the hardest boss in the game, but I do think this one's quite an enjoyable one, and the best of the custom maps, so it's going to be an A tier. After that, we have Steinmore, which I'm going to put at the B tier. Probably my favorite of the Fjordur mini-bosses, since it's very unique. It is a reskinned Dire Bear, but it's also like covered in rocks and stone. It's basically made of rocks, and it's got ice spikes floating around it, and it's got resistance to a lot of damage. It's like fighting a golem, so it's a lot more unique in the ways you have to fight it, and you kind of have to come up with more interesting ways to fight it, which I definitely think makes the boss fight more enjoyable. Next is the Dodorex. This one only comes around during Fear Evolved, and I'm going to put it in the A tier. It's a great boss. It's a world boss, so you can bring anything to it, but it also breathes fire, and it's just really fun to fight because there's so many different ways you can fight it with it being a world boss. It only spawns at nighttime. It has these zombie dodos too, so you get rewarded with those tames as well. I think this one's a great all-around boss. Next is the Desert Titan, which I'm going to put at the B tier. I've got all the Titans in here, and I think they're all really fun to fight. But the Desert Titan specifically has a really unique ability. It only flies and it cannot land, which means you have to bring flyers to this fight, which I think makes it really fun in my opinion. As well as there's the Flock that basically flies around it that can attack you, as well as it like strikes lightning, which is pretty cool. Next is the Lava Golem on Ragnarok. This one's going to be at the B tier as well. I can't really put it any higher since a mini boss, but I do think this is a great mini boss and definitely how you should do this one. It's one of the cave ones as well. I do like it more than the Ice Worm, I think. It's like a golem, so you basically have to bring like rocket launchers and stuff and really think about how you're going to fight it, as well as it's basically like in this giant pit, and you circle around it, having to do parkour while you try and outrun it as it chases you and throws rocks at you, and then you have to fight it. Next is the Experimental Giga, which I'm actually going to put at A tier. It's definitely my favorite of these mini-bosses on Genesis Part 2, and I think it's dope. It basically like blasts out of its cage when you come in, and it is a massive Giga that's way bigger than a normal one, when normal ones are already absolutely massive, and it like shoots poison out of its mouth and shoots poison balls out of its tentacles. It is such a dope boss, but you can also like get creatures throughout the mission to help fight with you, which I think is kind of interesting, even if they do kind of suck a little bit. You can also bring one creature into here, so you can't bring an army to take it on, so you just have like one creature, or one creature per tame, I believe anyway. You can also destroy these little barrels to knock it out, which I think is kind of fun, so you can basically try and lead it to the barrels, and then you can knock it out to get some extra damage on it. Well, this is a really fun boss fight, and I do enjoy it. Next is the Rockwell boss fight, which I'm actually going to put in the S tier. This is one of my favorite bosses in the game. It is really fun, and it's not just like whistling your creatures to go attack something. Even though you do have to do that with the heart, you basically have to go around and take out the tentacles, which makes it really intense. and really fun to do. You can kind of cheese it with the cactus broth, but usually I fight it like normally without the cactus broth, and I find it really fun to do, and I do enjoy it every time, and it's always super intense. After that is the Dinopithecus King. This one's a pretty good one. I'm going to put it in B tier. Definitely think it's better than the Megapithecus boss fight, as there's just a lot more to it. Basically, it like comes and jumps down, it throws poops at you. It has the Dinopithecus attacking you, as well as like Amargasaurus that are being ridden by Dinopithecus, and the Dinopithecus that are being held up by Cytomacrops. It's just really fun to kind of, it's just weird, doesn't really make much sense, but it is kind of fun to just do this boss fight, as well as it like jumps up on these little like ledges and throws poop at you and grenades and stuff. There's just so much to it. I think it is a really fun one, but it's not one of the best. I'm just gonna keep it at B. After that, we have Hadean Skull from Fjordur. I'm gonna put these ones in B as well. I think it's a pretty solid mini boss. It has 2 bosses instead, and each one kind of has its own thing that it does, the fire and ice, and I think it's a pretty fun one to fight. Even though I think one is like way stronger than the other, it is still pretty cool. Next boss on the list is the Dodo Wyvern, which I'm going to put in A as well with the Dodo Rex. I think both of the Dodo Rex and Dodo Wyvern are amazing bosses. They're world bosses. They have tons of health, and they're pretty difficult, even though you can cheese them as well. But it means you can also just bring so many different tactics and ways of killing them. You can kind of be creative with how you want to fight them, as well as they're absolutely massive. And the Dodo Wyvern has the zombie wyverns as well, which you get as a reward for killing this, which is dope. Next is the King Titan, which I want to put at S tier. It's basically like fighting Godzilla, and you can bring Titans to this fight, an army of Gigas or whatever you want to this fight. And it's just really fun, just fighting, basically like having an army go against this thing. It is absolutely dope. It's like the end game of Ark, and I find it very fun and enjoyable. So it's going to be in the S tier. I think it's one of the best bosses. After that, we have the Crystal Wyvern Queen, which I'm going to put at the B tier. I thought about putting this one in A, but I just don't think it's good enough to be right at A, but it's really close. It was the first ever like custom boss on a custom map, which I think gives it points, because never all the other bosses, they just put like multiple bosses into an arena and called it good. But this one's actually pretty fun, as it spawns a bunch of wyverns as well, and then you have the massive Crystal Wyvern Queen to fight. After that, I have the Master Controller, which I'm also going to put in the S tier. This is probably one of my favorite bosses, just because it's so unique, and there's just so much you can do. Basically, you have to be good on foot, which I think makes it a lot more interesting, because you actually have to like be on foot and be on your guard the entire time. And you can still bring an army of dinos to basically help, because there's like waves of dinos that come attack you and collect the code keys, and then you have to go through like different stages of the mission, and then you make it to the final one where it gets really intense, and then you have to actually start damaging Rockwell or Master Controller, and I think it's really fun. Next is Rockwell Prime, which I'm going to put at A tier. It's kind of close to S, but I don't think it's as good as some of the S tier boss fights, in my opinion anyway. This one is still really unique and definitely worthy of the A tier. You basically go around destroying the tentacles, and then you destroy his little like mutated whatever the crap these things are, and then it'll like turn into his Rockwell Prime mode, and then you like finish him off, which I think it's a pretty cool boss fight overall. That's going to be it for this video. This is my entire ranking of all of the Ark bosses and mini bosses. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe. Thanks for watching, and bye.